Okay, so spirits continued. When I was taking amanita muscaria, there were occasions when I had the spirits enter me and live vicariously through me for 10 or 20 minutes at a time. And these spirits, on one particular day, they made manifest as such. One was a Viking, and I embodied the spirit of this marauding, violent Viking, and envisioned him as he was in his longboat pulling on the oar with massive shoulders and lat muscles, latissimus dorsi. These warriors would have had immense power. Can you imagine? They rowed most of the way from Norway or Scandinavia, and albeit they had very elementary sails, the sail could only aid them a little bit in one direction, the direction they was going in. If the wind was blowing in another direction, the sail, it wasn't the variety that could be utilised, because they couldn't tack into the wind, and they couldn't harness the sail in any particular angle. It was just a sail which, was just like a big sheet on a mast, and so they need to be very, very powerful. And when these characters got to the British Isles, then of course they would go about their business, and the energy was a very, very distinct Viking energy that I felt in my very essence. And the next variety of spirit was that of a wolf, and when we experienced being a wolf, there's an actual thing. It's called lycanthropy, when we embody the spirit of the wolf. And I suppose this is where the whole werewolf things come from, because when we become very, very primal, we embody many of the spirits of animals and ancestors and all those sort of things. And so there's most certainly something to be said for that. And I was down on all fours, I was howling, and I was sniffing. That's better. At the world about me, and I was considering that I was alpha male of the pack, and I exhibited myself in such a manner. And on all fours I was running through the autumn wood, and I came upon a high promontory where I climbed upon on all fours, and I stood there, whoa, whoa, for some time. Fortunately, me and my friend were in the middle of the wood, and he was filming me at this moment in time, and nobody else could see us, albeit some may have heard. Then there was the primal man, where no sooner as the spirit of the wolf left me, then that of a very, very primal man entered into my person. And this primal man was like a Central American Indian. And at this particular time, it was when the 3 ships of Columbus were anchored just offshore, and the smaller boats were coming to the land, and there were men on horses. And so I saw this, and I had some sort of a vision mixed with terror as to what these strange beasts were. And of course what I did was I embellished the spirit of the primal man and that scene with the knowledge that I had of Columbus's travels and what the ancient Indians perceived of Columbus's ships and men on horses at that particular time. Because before Columbus arrived on those isles, there were no horses on that continent, and so they'd never seen a man sitting on a horse, so it is said. And I suppose this is where this Manitou thing comes from, the half man and the half horse, you see, out of this mythology. They thought that there were strange beasts. These beasts had two heads. One was a big long head on the front, another one was a human head on the top, and they seemed to be amalgamated together. Very, very bizarre and interesting. And whether there is actually any real truth in that, who knows, but it makes good mythology, good stories, and it's something for it to contemplate. And so what I did, I envisioned all this stuff, and I envisioned the mentality which was wrote about in our mythology, and I saw these monsters through the eyes of this primal man. And so in my book I recount these stories, and I speak of these sea monsters which were coming to shore, and they had huge white flapping angry wings. And so I envisioned that on a day of a tempest, and they were anchored, or they were just approaching the shores, and their sails were flapping, and all the rigging was, scattered and angry before they foiled them down. And so I sketched out a bit of my own poetry in relation to this. But those feelings were very, very real to me. And when they was within me, the energy was so profound. And when they'd left, I was like, what the fuck just happened? And I was speaking to the camera, when my friend's recording, and he's going, what the fuck just happened? And for a long time after, I was trying to articulate what it felt like. And so I made these videos, and I put them up on my channel. And it was another arrow to my quiver of the knowledge, the experience of spiritual entities. And if you can relate to becoming exceedingly angry on occasion, or becoming exceedingly amorous on another, becoming exceedingly adventurous, becoming exceedingly determined, or becoming exceedingly cowardice. If you can imagine when you have felt those life fields within you, doubtless you wouldn't have considered them to be entities at the time. You would probably not thought about them in any great detail at all in a psychological, spiritual, metaphysical, philosophical way. You would have just engaged with the energy. And when they left, you may have said to yourselves, what the fuck came over me? And other people may have said, you look like a devil, or you was very different, or wow, I couldn't believe that you could do that. Where did that come from? We see things in people that isn't their natural disposition, or it's not a persona that we've recognised before. And so this is the whole thing. And I'm always saying that the human being is like a faceted stone, faceted gem, faceted diamond. And some of us have more facets than others. Some only have one facet that they present to the world. They are dull, they never express themselves, they never do anything, that you never see another side to them, they never get angry, they never get joyous, all these sort of things. But then, of course, we've got a scale whereby some people, you can see anger and joy in them, you can see a sense of adventure in them, you can see lots of other things within them, as more and more facets of this turning diamond face the world and face people. And if we are versed in the spiritual realm, then we will have a very high recognition of who is at the helm at any given time. Now, I've lived a long time, people, relatively, and it's not only the years that I've lived, but it's the amount of things that I've done within those years. And so I've often said in my videos that I've lived, let's say, at least 100 lives of some of the greatest of adventurers on this earth. Because lots of these adventurers, renowned adventurers, they've done a few things, like they've climbed Everest, or they've hiked to the pole, North Pole. They've done amazing feats, but that's all they've ever done, really. That's all they've ever been renowned for doing. But I've done lots of varying things, travelling, all around the world many times, and always with a sense of adventure. And so I found myself engaging in many varying experiences which I hadn't recognised within myself before. And when we go into different environments, then different spirits enter into our bodies. And for instance, I've spoken in previous videos about the spirit of the mountaineer, the spirit that took me to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro and back. Then the spirit of great adventure, which has took me all around the world, mostly travelling on my own. And then we've got all different sorts of spirits which we partake in along the way, some of them benevolent and some of them malevolent. And we can find ourselves being influenced by very negative energies sometimes, and on occasion we may be embroiled within their energy because it took us by surprise, or the circumstances of their energy coming about gave rise to it being very autonomous at the time. And so we can speak of like being under the influence of anger or stress, or being seriously compromised, being threatened, being jealous, being envious, being in fear of our lives. All these sort of things, they are going to bring out another spirit. And it depends on what sort of collection of spirits any person has, whether that spirit is going to be that of a warrior, or that of a coward, that of a diplomat, or that of somebody who considers themselves to be so righteous that they're not about to make any compromises at all. And so we can see these characters playing out with people all over the world throughout history. And so this is the subject matter that I'm broaching, and speaking about my personal subjective experiences, because we can read about all this supernatural stuff from the greatest of authors, and we can intellectualize it, but we can never know it. How we are going to know these things is when we experience them ourselves. And in my book I speak about my encounter with Jehovah, my encounter with the devil, my encounter with Jesus, my encounter with angels, and many other variety of astral being. There's a whole array of spiritual energies out there that will engage with us if we invite them, or if we enter into certain psychological dimensions, because they're there, that's their realm, that's where they reside. And so if we're living regular sedentary human lives, we won't encounter too much evil, or we won't encounter too many angels and apparitions of God and all these sort of things, because we are not placing ourselves into that spiritual dimension. But the whole thing about having the greatest of religious faith is that you condition your mind and heart into being in that proximity to God, angels, Jesus, and then when you are positioned within that vibratory approximation, that's when then you can encounter these entities, because you have entered their terrain. And so in my book I speak about how I encountered these entities, and you can see that by whatever given circumstances were prevailing at the time, there was a vibration to those circumstances, and that vibration then allowed entities to have a confluence with my vibration, and momentarily I experienced them. And so we can, upon experience, when we know how these things work, we can head towards having more of those experiences and away from less experiences that we don't require. And so if we head towards the proverbial light, so to speak, then for the best part we will avoid encounters with negative, nefarious, destructive energies. But if we engage in negative activities, i.e. like we're doing all the things that we shouldn't really be doing for our mental and physical health, if we are engaging in many bad energies within people, and we are abusing ourselves with drugs and alcohol and orgies and all those sort of things, and stealing and lying, then of course we are in the realm of the devil, aren't we? It's very reasonable, rational, logical to accept that that's what's going to happen. And then when we see people who are engaged in these very, very negative energies, we can see that they just go further and further down. More lying, more stealing, more acts of violence and all those sort of things, until ultimately they will be killed, or they will die. And so that is the ultimate realm of these negative, nefarious energies. On the other hand, then, if we do many acts of benevolence and love and kindness, and we fill our hearts with optimism, and we have a belief system, and we have a practice, because it's not just about belief. And this is why I condemn faith in my book, because it isn't just about faith. Faith is one thing. Faith is it's the fiction of knowledge. Knowledge is experience. Faith is the illusion of knowledge. It's the hope of something making manifest or being so, whereas real knowledge is the real thing. And so I used to say to many people who had the greatest of faith, seemingly, but even their faith was faith. It was faith inside faith, because very easily you would see it just slip away, and you would see they had all different sorts of actions which were completely outside of what they were supposed to be having an adherence to, because faith just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't cut it. You have to know. And how do you know? Well, you have to put yourself into a certain vibration. And this is why I speak in my book that I know God. You can know God. You can know God. You can know Satan. You can know angels. And you can know spirits. And so for those of you that are listening to my videos, thinking that I'm not being explanatory enough, then you might want to read the book. And on top of that, you might want to read a whole bunch of other books on the similar subject, because it takes a long time to get your head around the metaphysical. And by the time you are versed in what the greatest of intellectuals have said about the spiritual realm, when you encounter one of these spirits, then you know the efficacy of what they've been speaking about, and all of a sudden you will enter into that realm where they've been speaking about for a long time. The proof of the pudding, ladies and gentlemen, is in the eating. And so if you want to know deeply what the spiritual realm is, then you have to enter into a practice. And one of the practices that I entered into was to have out-of-body experiences. And the first time I had an out-of-body experience, I said to myself that I would never doubt anything about the metaphysical world, because it was so incredible, so amazing, so very different to anything that I've ever learned about this so-called physical world. I entered into another world. And so one of the books you might want to start on is Other Worlds by Rudolf Steiner. And some of the things that Madame Blavatsky was writing, and even Carl Jung, the more metaphysical stuff that Jung was writing about in relation to archetypes, personality types, metaphysical, mythological, alchemical, all these different sorts of things. It's all there if you want it, people.